Thank you everyone for joining. This is obviously the Portland/Pacific Northwest Tableau user group. In this similar fashion as the last few that we've had during the 2020 pandemic, we're sharing our Portland user group with the entirety of the Pacific Northwest in its virtual format. Basically anybody can join, so we're taking advantage of that. So those of you here from the Portland region or the Oregon region, you're joined with us by others from the Pacific Northwest. We tend to get a lot of Seattle folks, sometimes more Seattle folks than Portland folks, and then all the way up and down the PNW. So we welcome everybody. Glad you could join us. You'll notice that that our itinerary or the title of this looks a little different than maybe when you RSVP'd. We had to do, unfortunately, a last-minute schedule change just yesterday. So there's a little bit of scrambling on my end, but thankfully we made this work. The data haiku had to drop out. Just some last-minute things came up, but we will have them again early next year, possibly January or early February. We were pretty excited for that talk, so we want to make sure that this talk is shared amongst everybody. They were going to talk about the integrations that they have with Tableau, allowing Tableau developers to integrate some machine learning and AI components into their Tableau workflow. So look for that. We'll probably have that posted in a few weeks, our next meeting. So the format of this is similar or exactly the same as last time and the time before that. We're trying to pack everything into a single hour. That way we don't bore you. And so I think this will move pretty quickly. I'm going to try to talk as little as possible here at the beginning, pass off the mic for our community spotlight. And this is our chance to shine the spotlight on someone from the Portland or greater Pacific Northwest community. The idea here is that we can't see each other in person. We can't see each other's faces or really get to network at all. So this is our chance to at least get to know someone from the community. If anybody's interested in doing this, it's very, very low key. You can make it what you want. You can talk about something that you're doing in Tableau. You could talk about a project you're working on, or you could just talk about like your hobbies. It's really just to get to know you. If you want to do this, at the bottom of the event page that we have set up and on our just main page for Tableau Tug, for the PDX Tug, we have a sign up and you can use this to sign up for a community spotlight session or just any sort of presentation. We always welcome that. This round we have Sean Packard, who graciously agreed to do this for us. He's local here to Portland, and I checked out his Tableau public, and he has a lot of good stuff on there, and seems to be a pretty engaged and active member of the Tableau community. So we're pretty excited to have him on board for this session, and we'll get to him shortly. Last is the main feature presentation here, and this is the one that is replacing Data IQ, but we're actually really excited about this. This is a topic that we've actually wanted to talk about or have in one of our tugs for quite some time, and we just haven't got around to it. So it was actually a blessing of disguise for us to be able to do this. And we're very grateful for Ben for just yesterday agreeing to come give this presentation to us. So thank you, Ben. I'll probably thank him like 4 times throughout this. But the idea here is that user adoption for our dashboards and the things that we create as Tableau developers is basically everything. We could create the most beautiful, well-designed, informative dashboard in the world, but if nobody can see it or nobody has access to it, then it's completely meaningless, right? Obviously, we have ways that we share these dashboards with people. We don't just keep them in Tableau desktop to ourselves. One of those ways is Tableau Server, which is great, but one of the issues with Tableau Server often is that it's an environment in which people that actively use Tableau and develop with Tableau exist in at the same time as the people that are just simply trying to look at those dashboards. And a lot of the users, downstream users of our dashboards, don't really care about Tableau. They don't want to see all that stuff. So the idea is to not confuse our end users and provide dashboards, our work embedded in a place that is an environment that's a little bit more familiar to the end user, all with the idea of increasing end user adoption. I won't talk too much about that because Ben will go through all of that. So I'll let him do that. I just want to say that this is something that we're excited about presenting, and it's when we're happy to knock this off of our checklist. So with that, I'm going to pass things off to Sean Packard, and he's going to tell us a little bit about himself and the things he's working on.
Thanks, Ryan. All right. You guys able to hear me and see my screen well? Yes? No?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yep, looking good.
Perfect. All right, guys. So let's get into it. So I noticed that Ryan mentioned that I am, he called me a Portlander in his email. I'm very happy to be accepted into the city. It's only been about a year since I've been here, though. I'm actually originally from the Northeast and relocated to Denver for a couple of years before I actually made my way out here with my contract position. So I'll just try to breeze through who I am real quickly. Got my undergraduate from the University of Connecticut in 2014 in accounting. Got a master's in combination accounting tax 2015, got my CPA, and the long and short of it, after about 4 years, I decided I liked the tools a lot more than I liked my trade of tax. So I traded in my tax career and fully pivoted to data analysis over the past year. And in that time, I've been using Tableau, which is why I'm here today. I've been using Alteryx to pretty much hand in hand to data prep everything that I receive, get it into a format that's usable for Tableau. In addition to Power BI, SQL, DAX, and a lot of the tools that everyone's very familiar with. So what I'm going to be showing you today is basically just a very simple test of statistical significance that's automated within the visual that I'm going to show you. So we get the question a lot of time, we put together bar charts, all these dashboards. We make our case for the story that we want to tell. And of course, the first question that we get from our business stakeholders is this significant, this change period? And what they're really saying is, should I care? Should I spend some time to actually dive into this further? So in order to answer that question, a good way is to build in a statistical test into your Tableau visual. So essentially, it's going to flag it for you if it's above a certain Z-score in our case. So I won't bore you with the particulars of the stat test because it's a little bit technical, but essentially your stat test is going to be dictated by your use case. Are you testing means or are you testing proportion? And in our use case today, we're going to be testing proportions. We have a very basic example of a survey, 1 to 5 scale, where 5 is the highest rating, 1 is your lowest rating. And we want to know the percentage of people this period that gave us 5s, does that differ significantly from the period prior? So we're going to use a 2-sample Z-test. And then for the last portion, a little bit more art than science for the second visual that I'm going to show you is when we're visualizing survey responses, a lot of the times we want to find the story with the quantitative side of it, but then we want a couple quotes, a couple open-ended verbatim from our responders to really drive that story home if we're going to include it in finished materials to give to our stakeholders, because I think it just adds a little bit of animation with what you're trying to get across. So one solution that I've looked to that I think draws people in, makes them excited to use a dashboard, and really that's what you're trying to do is attract people to actually using your dashboard, is a jittered bar chart. So this is going to show you the volume of response by group of your segment. We can use size and color to encode a lot of meaning into our charts, like word count and then sentiment, things like that. And then our tooltip functionality is going to give us a lot of leeway to display that information. And some of the technical challenges that I'm going to show you are line of detail expressions. We're going to use some calculated fields, parameter creation to choose confidence level. I'll show you what I'm using effect size for. It's just a term that's basically going to show the size of the impact, and then some dynamic tooltips. And just to give credit where credit's due, I used a lot of the techniques shown in the blog of Steve Wexler, and in addition to Tone Hong. So Tone's blog is great for adding a lot of shine to your visuals, and Steve actually has a lot of statistical analysis stuff that is available through his blog if you want to check that out. So that said, the visual here, I'll put this in display mode so we can see it a little bit better. This is the statistical test that we're going to look at. So we can see here to the left on our axis, our y-axis, are statements that can be anything for our survey, right? So brand X, whatever it is, communicates discounts effectively. They constantly innovate. They create products that are relevant for me. And it's a 1 to 5 scale. And what the bars are representing are the percentage of people that gave us the highest rating for this current period. The lines on the visual are going to show us that same percentage for the prior period. And it's color encoded, written with a calculated field, so that if we did worse than last period, it's going to be red. And if we did better than last period, it's going to be green. The meat of the visual is coming from these red dots here that are generated dynamically behind the scenes. We've written a lot of calculations running in the background that are telling us, is the difference between periods statistically significant? In addition to that, we have slicers up here, which are going to allow us to change our confidence interval. I'll show you exactly what that means when we go into it a little bit further. But if we're okay with a smaller confidence level, we can indicate that. If we actually want to be a little bit more stringent, we'll notice we have 2 significant marks on our visual right now. But if we bump this up to a 99%, we will see that one of those disappears. So at a different confidence interval, you're going to get different results. So one of the reasons why this chart is very effective is we can build in into our tooltip functionality everything that we calculate, right? So if we hover over our stat tests, we're going to see our top one for the current period, in addition to the total responders, our derived percentages. And the biggest thing we want to look at here is our z-score. And our z-score is going to tell us if that difference is statistically significant. So aesthetically within our tooltip, where the biggest things are in red here, because that's what we're concerned with. So if we look at one that is not statistically significant, indicated by the lack of a red dot here, we can see that in the text in the red towards the bottom of the tooltip. So that will tell us if the proportions change significantly, and then you'll see effect size, which is under that. And for this mark, it's trivial. So a proportionate difference could we're using a z-test to test for that. But the next question is, what's the impact? Is it big or is it large? Do we have a lot of people going from 5s to 4s, which will affect the proportion percentage? Or do we have a lot of people going from 5s to 1s, which means they're having this huge discrepancy in what they're seeing quarter to quarter? So for this particular mark that is statistically significant, we see it's trivial, right? So we did worse this quarter, but that could mean we have a lot of 5s from the previous quarter that are just going to 4s, which potentially is not really that big a deal. But if we go down to this one here, which is also statistically significant, we can see that our effect size is medium, which is basically included in a range that's going to say we actually had a lot of people that were 5s before that are going down to 2s, they're going down to 1s, that are dragging down that average as opposed to the proportion. And that means this is something that we should dig into further. Also, it's important, I'll show you the underlying calculations in a moment, just the mechanics of them. But the reason why we build these calculations out in the background and do that before our data prep is that they allow these to be dynamic. So right now we can say, okay, we have 2 statistically significant changes period over period. What's actually driving that? So we have a gender slicer up here in our top right, where if we were to switch this to only males, we see no statistical differences, right? So we can say with pretty high confidence, if we switch this to females, that females are driving our changes quarter over quarter. The good thing here is that the point here that brand X has interesting social media content, that is actually going in the correct direction. Our percentage, our top box percentage was greater this period than last period, and it's having an effect size that is more than trivial. So what that means is we had a lot of 1s and 2s that are becoming 5s. They're rating us higher and driving that average up, which is what we want to see. And then we also have the age bins too. And we can do any categorical variable here we can include, and it just makes this very dynamic. And all of these red dots indicating the significance are just going to automatically update. So in order to create this, a couple of the challenges that we actually come across are we have to write the underlying calculations. What I want to draw attention to is this looks like a ton, but only half these are actually written calculations. What we want to do is be able to capture the prior period numbers within the current period context. So up here you have Q2. These first 3 columns here are prior period numbers. And I want to call out that the way that I get that is by writing a line of detail expression. So these are something I didn't learn about until I was a little bit further along in my Tableau development. But essentially, top 1, I'm sorry, this is current period. Let's go to the prior period. I'm writing a line of detail expression, which is saying, essentially ignore this filter up here, this Q2 filter. And if it equals the period prior, then I want the top 1 for that period. So that allows me to get the prior period within the current period context, which is what allows me to draw this prior period line here. And then the other technical component that I wanted to also include is that in order to get access to the parameter and make that dynamic, what we have to do is create a parameter here that's going to be our 90%, our 95, and 99% confidence intervals. These values here are the z-scores that above these values are actually is what's going to, by the test, determine if they're significant. It's a good feature of Tableau that you're actually able to display them as different values, because I originally didn't change them when I created these visuals, and the question I always got was, what does 1.6 mean? What does 1.9 mean? And that's not what I want to discuss in my story, right? So we display those as different values, and then we are able to write a calculated field that is going to let us say, if our z-score is greater than or equal to what we select, then flag that for me with this red dot, else just don't give me anything. And we can include that up here on our row shelf. And that's gonna be what's driving this dynamic flag that we get, that we don't have to write these calculations every single time we get new data. All we're gonna have to do is switch 1 or 2 quarters for each of the calculations, and then it's going to be dynamically updated. So that's the meat of what I have for you. What I wanted to show you that it's probably a little more appealing visually to look at is the jittered bar chart of the open-ended responses that we get. So what I like about this approach is, number one, it maintains the feature of a regular bar chart. So we can see immediately that among negative comments, so these are the category that we're using here is sentiment, ranging from extremely negative to extremely positive, is that we're able to see that the most comments we received this period are coming in the negative sentiment, and then the least amount is going to be neutral. Why this is also cool is that since they're not aggregated, we actually have access to the full verbatim themselves. So we can hover over, see who left it, the location, the sentiment, how many words they are. I try to do something a little bit useful, and I think it's easier if we show the main feature of this is the way we use these in the group that I currently work in is to find a couple of verbatim to drive home the story that we're trying to tell. So it might be that we uncover something about crop top apparel or a certain segment for one of the apps. But in the interest of anonymity, I just downloaded this data set off Kaggle, and it is coronavirus tweets from early on in the pandemic. So maybe we identified that supermarket was something that came up very, very frequently. What we can do is write a parameter with a couple underlying calculations that are only going to include verbatims that contain this word. So if we turn our filter on, we have only verbatims that are going to include the word supermarket or whatever we include. And the last feature that I want to highlight too is that we've sized these bubbles according to the count of the words, because with the survey data that we receive, we get a lot of 2-word, 3-word responses like it was terrible or it was great that we're not able to glean information from. So it's very often the case that longer verbatims are more thoughtful. They're actually going to give us information that is going to provide context that we can give our business stakeholders that's useful to them. So if we size bubbles this way, we can actually hover over and just read that. And then if we just want to go back to our original context, we can filter that back out. So wanted to give you a little bit of a taste, something with a little bit more meat on its bones, a statistical test for period over period changes, in addition to a creative way that we go about visualizing open-ended survey data.
Well, thank you, Sean. That's impressive work there. Trying to convey statistics to end users, especially if they don't have familiarity with any of the statistical methods, is always a challenge. So you have some pretty interesting approaches here. There were a couple questions around you might need to share your screen again.
Sure.
Around the red dot that you inserted into the calculated field. I think that's something a lot of people didn't know you could do.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we did here is we created a parameter for the confidence interval. Show it. So these are the values over the level that are actually going to be statistically significant. And then I'm using that within a calculated field. I always forget what it's called. Here it is. And then we write, after we create the parameter, we have to write the actual calculated field. What I'm saying here is if the absolute value that we have for our statement, our mark on the visual is greater than or equal to the confidence interval, then show me that red mark, else don't do anything. And then the trick after you do that is to drag that calculated field up here into your row shelf. And then that's what's going to be appearing towards the axis. That's what's going to allow you to flag the significance. And just a heads up, definitely include absolute value there, because I didn't for my first round of reporting. And if you have differences on the other side, they're negative, and you miss those, your visual might take a hit in its reputation.
There are a few questions here. One, this is from Chris Thompson, are the sentiments calculated before coming into the workbook or calculated in the workbook itself?
Very good question. I actually since I have an Alteryx license, I was able to get access to the text mining tools that allow you to score those sentiments before uploading into Tableau. And I've also used the Vader library within, it's a Python package to do that myself. But in all instances of sentiment, I've prepped that beforehand. But I know that a lot of people that work with NLP engines or softwares, the Claire Bridges of the world, they're able to extract that data directly from their NLP engines and upload that into Tableau.
So yeah, so sounds like mostly outside of Tableau there.
Mostly outside, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to get a handle of the questions. Are the confidence intervals dynamically calculated in your data set, or are those being manually updated?
Those are static in the sense that they're only created with the initial parameter creation, and those are discussions that I have with my group, what confidence intervals they want to see. I wouldn't decide that unilaterally and just provide it to them. I ask them, what confidence intervals do you want to see? And then I include those in the workbook. 95 is typically the standard, just because a P of 0.05 is kind of the standard for what you see. But I also have a few business stakeholders that say, no, I only want to include it if it's 99%. I want to be really stringent about it and only call out like kind of semi outliers.
Makes sense. And then finally, I think this is the last question. Will this be anywhere for others to access? I think it's pretty cool, and I think other people want to be able to dig into this. Is this published to Tableau Public?
It is not currently. I can upload it to Tableau Public since it's completely public data that I downloaded from Kaggle. I can upload that to my Tableau Public page, and then I can provide that to you, Ryan, for to make available to everyone that's on the webcast.
Yep. I'll send that out in the follow-up email to this event so everybody can have that. Okay, so let's see. How are we doing on time? There was one more. Oh, there was another question. So going back to the red dot,
Yep.
I think there's more questions about where you actually source that red dot from.
Yep. So I didn't get too into it just because I didn't want to dive into the nitty. Am I still sharing? Yeah, I am.
Yep.
I didn't want to dive into the nitty gritty too far, but essentially, if we go back to the actual dashboard,
Yeah.
we'll see.
Hey, Sean, I'm going to jump in. Sorry, it's not the calculation. You explained that really well about where your T-stats and scores are coming from. It's more the literally inside the calculation. How did you get it to show a red dot that you copy and pasted in the calculation editor?
Oh, I got you. I think it was a Wingding character that I've looked up. So if you go into, let's go in here. If you went into label here, you can go into your fonts. I think what I did was go into Wingding, this font here, and then there will be a letter, a capital letter or something you can type in and a red dot will appear, is how I generated that.
Yep. We do the same thing a lot with ASCII characters too. You can go in and you can insert them into your formulas so you don't have to worry about formatting or anything like that. And you can just copy paste them. Gives you a lot of flexibility that isn't necessarily known out of the box. So well done, Sean. Awesome. Awesome touch for having that in.
Yeah, it's really useful for up down arrows if something's trending in a certain direction. I didn't know though that they were colored. That was kind of news to me. So I was kind of surprised to see that in there. I thought they were just always grayscale. So well, thank you, Sean. That was great. Definitely some pretty robust stuff there. And I think that you have a lot of content for others to dig through after I get this posted, and which I will do. And then everything also, all these meetings are recorded. So if you wanted to review things again, everything's posted to Tableau's YouTube page. So if you just go to their YouTube page, you'll see all of the user groups meetings that all of them are recorded now. And I'll also try to post a link to that in the follow-up email. With that, we want to transition over to Ben. I already kind of hinted at what he's discussing with us today. I did want to say that Ben is a colleague of mine, but he's actually someone I knew about before I started Interworks. And then after I joined Interworks, I have come to appreciate Ben. He's an absolute powerhouse in Tableau. People internally will post the most ridiculous hard questions. There's some problem to solve, and somehow Ben is always the first person to respond with some like magic solution. I think the rest of my colleagues on this call would agree with that. So he's someone I admire as a Tableau user, and he has a lot of good stuff to say. So we're very excited to have him on. And again, I thank you for yesterday agreeing to present to us. We're all pretty grateful. I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, for sure. Brian, it's probably the nicest introduction anybody's ever given me. So I appreciate that, and very embarrassing. But it's excited to be here. Excited to be talking with the PDX group. I actually lived in Beaverton for a few years right out of school. And that's where we had our first two kids. So lots of fond memories of the Beaverton, Portland area. I've traveled up to Seattle as well while we were there. So looking forward to this. Just a bit of background on me. There's me and my wife right there. For you baseball fans, this is up at Safeco Field. Interestingly enough, Sean, I kind of reversed your trend. So I grew up in Colorado. Then I moved after being in Utah and in Thailand for a couple of years, moved up to Oregon. And so hence the Colorado Rockies gear, went to Safeco, saw the Mariners blow out the Rockies as is normal. So that was still a lot of fun though. Ended up catching a ball, which was nice. Haven't gotten that. And then we went to England for a year and then settled down on the East Coast. Sorry for switching coasts. But we've got our three kids out here. My oldest, Joan, they're in the orange. And then Ruth is our middle child. She's the redhead. They were both born in, like I said, Oregon. And we've got Mabel, the blonde, in the center. So we've got a good group. I have a lot of good times out here, but several good friends and fond memories of our time out west. But I'm here today and feel a little bit bad after Brian's intro to talk about branded analytics, in the sense that we're going to look at what embedding can do and how we can use that to create a brand experience for your end users in a Tableau consumption environment. I'm not going to be diving deep into Tableau Desktop. In fact, I don't even have it up right now. But if we have some time at the end, like, let's dive in and do some cool stuff. Like if anyone wants to throw an LOD my way, let's have a good time and do what we can with that. But It's when we look around in the industry, when we go out as consultants, or just in general, when we look at our life, it seems to be there's more and more an intensity and a need to have data to back things up. Whether that is like Sean showed us, showing a business report and then someone says, yeah, what's the statistical significance behind that? Or whether it is, hey, I saw this post online. Is this true? Is this not? We don't know. It reminds me of this quote by Dr. Edwin Fisher, "In God we trust, others must provide data." Now, it's not a direct quote from him. He referenced it in congressional testimony. And honestly, there's a bit of irony here where he referenced it in congressional testimony saying, well, disputing the effects of secondhand smoke. So I hope that he got data and he learned from that experience. But the point still holds that we have organizations, public, private, familial, personal, where we're trying to figure out where does our trust start, where does it end, and how do we have data to back things up. But the thing about data is that it's only the start of working with the entire experience you have of communicating information. And so I have it up here, data is the start of the user's journey. And there's this quote from SuperOffice, it's a research firm, that 86% of buyers will pay more for a better customer experience. And so what's interesting there is I'm a diehard Android guy. And so to me, the Apple experience makes no sense. Why would I pay hundreds of dollars premium to get a lesser experience that isn't innovating as fast, that is kind of stagnated? Now, obviously, there's a lot of personal bias there, but the thing is, it is a wonderful user experience. If you want to study marketing, if you want to study building community, if you want to study how to build up brand loyalty, Apple is the way to go because they have that and you pay for it. But the thing is, this was written back in 2018, so it didn't know what was happening in 2020. But the thing is, there's a key brand differentiator that they said is going to be what that user experience is. And we talk about how that works, especially in an embedded style environment, and we apply it back to Tableau. Embedding is kind of that final step. So Ryan gave away a little bit of my talk earlier where he said that Tableau server, as it's set up, is really nice for development work. It's great for hosting content, for permissioning content, making sure that people can see what they're allowed to see, making sure we're distributing our efforts appropriately. But it can be a little bit much for your end users. And so a common solution is to embed your workbooks inside of either your own product or put it inside of a public-facing workspace like your Tableau public environment does. Or if you do it inside of your own internal portal or something that you buy somewhere else, the idea is Tableau itself can be the data platform that supports all of your insights, even if it's not the main website that you're going to. So you can talk about all sorts of benefits about embedded analytics. This is the slide that you should screenshot if you want to take it for a definition later and have on there. I'm not going to read it all to you, but the idea is there's lots of value both to you as a content creator, as somebody who loves creating Tableau workbooks and dashboards and wants to get those out for people to view, but there's also value to your customers. So if you're providing information, not just internally, but externally, embedding can do that. And it does that, simplifying it, really the too long did not read of this is you embed things by putting them in a website. It brings value to you by allowing you to brand your workbooks. It brings value to you by allowing you to extend what's possible. So we've seen a lot of great work that Sean has done inside of Tableau. Embedding lets you bring a whole slew of other resources to enhance that Tableau experience. And then on top of that, just for your end consumers. So your customers, call them internal, call them external. It's a familiar website feel. They don't have to learn Tableau server. They don't have to learn how to navigate through different projects. They can go and get what they need. There's also a clean targeted interface. You don't have to put out a reminder, hey guys, please only look at the thing that is designated -prod, or, oh crap, I left a few spare data sources in there when I was developing. Very guilty of that and that process, but you can target your consumption experience to the end. Because if we're talking return on investment, if we're talking what we want to use Tableau for, if we don't have anybody who's actually looking at the stuff that we build, the only people that are going to be happy in the room are going to be us because we had a great time building our dashboards. But even then, we may be a little bit sad because our view count just stays at the 2 views, one from when you originally published it and one from the second time you checked to see how many views there were, right? So embedded analytics is this idea of presenting Tableau information, our familiar interactivity, our familiar dashboards, but done in a way that others can come and access it in ways that are much simpler and much easier. And at Interworks, we like to refer to this as our branded analytics, because it gives us the capacity to communicate your analytics brand to your end users. So let me go through and give a quick pop quiz here. Starts easy, gets a little bit harder. Feel free to throw this in the Q&A or in the chat. Does anybody know what store this is and where? Leave it open for a couple seconds. So we got M&M's Las Vegas. M&M's, you got half of it right. M&M's is correct. Not quite in Times Square. Give you a hint, look at the, yeah, New York, everybody's dancing around it, but look at the source in the bottom left. And London, there we go. So shout out to Tom, let me expand that out so I can see your last name. I'm gonna guess Peterson, but I don't wanna get it wrong. Yeah, Tom Peterson, well done for calling it out. That's M&M's in Leicester Square. And didn't take that picture myself, but my family and I had been there when we lived over in England. Great place, huge fan of M&M's. Probably my favorite thing I've seen coming out of COVID is the idea that behind your mask, you just pour a thing of M&M's and then you can eat them like kibble as you're walking around. So haven't tried it yet. My wife hasn't let me, but go for that if you want to. Okay, second one. This one's a little more local to Portland, so apologies to those who are joining from Seattle. Anyone know what we're looking at here? I'll try and get the chat out of the way. Powells, there we go. Lydia. Well, yeah, the whole group knows. Good. Good. So Powells is one of the most intense and fantastic bookstores you'll ever go to. So if you're ever down from Seattle, go into Powells. There's an interesting, wonderful brand and vibe that they've built inside of the Powells location, where it's this used bookstore feel, but there's a community that's in there. Obviously, this is a pre-COVID picture, but it's a wonderful place to go and to just experience books. How about this one? This one's another personal favorite, pretty easy. Not a specific location. What store are we looking at? Five Guys. Good. Good. And I think this kind of illustrates a point of why I ended up on the East Coast rather than the West Coast. I apologize for the controversy here, but I will take Five Guys over In-N-Out any day. Some people may argue that they're different experiences, and I'm totally fine with that. It doesn't change the fact that the burgers taste way better at Five Guys than they do at In-N-Out. But the thing is, when you look inside of a Five Guys, there's an experience that's happening here. When you look inside of Powell's, or you look inside of your, the first one we were at, when we were looking at M&M World, there's something we want to have happen. Now, this is probably my bonus round. If I had t-shirts, I would give one out here. Does anybody know what restaurant we're referencing here? It's one that's local to Portland. It's outside of the city, out in the suburbs. Used to be a food truck. Ah, Joe, well done. 808. 808 Grinds. It is on the t-shirt. Right. So if you were looking for that, you'd be able to see it. But this was hands down my favorite food truck when I lived in Portland, and loved their stand-up shop that they had. So if anybody loves Hawaiian food, highly, highly recommend the 808 Grinds. But what's interesting here is when you look at a brand that they're trying to explain, you've got the t-shirts, you've got the surfing feel, you've got Aloha everything that they're calling. The idea here is you want your customers to have some sort of experience when they come in. We need to be thinking about the same thing with our data, with our dashboards. What is our dashboard going to do that reinforces our brand? If we're sharing them out externally, we want people to know Interworks built this, or fill in the blank of your company, you built this. Or if it's you as a developer on Tableau Public, I want to show off that I built this. Someone who does this really well is like the Fleur-Age twins. If you look at their blog posts, you see a dashboard and you know that it was built by one of them. Sean, you mentioned, I never know how to pronounce his name, Toan Hong, his Tableau Magic website. You see one of his workbooks and you know it was something that he built because he has this branded experience. And embedding lets you do that by putting it just simply inside of a wrapper that looks like your website. But more than that, when you start embedding, you actually have the ability to start playing around and driving home that brand even more. So these GIFs are a few things that are coming from our demos that we have out live about an embedded experience that we call Curator at Interworks. But the idea behind this one, I'll just show a couple examples, is you can actually play around and do things like customize your loading screen. So this is Interburger. It's a fictional burger shop. There's a bit of a theme in my talk today. I must be hungry. But you get this loading, bouncing icon. That makes it more fun. It's better than that spinning wheel of death that we all hate. When somebody asks, it's a 5 billion row data set, why isn't it loading in half a second? And you go, well, you know, we're working on it. And you need to be a little bit more realistic with that. But you can have the ability to make your content more intense and more personalized. Along with that, for me as a Tableau developer, I am very jealous of my dashboard space. I want it to be communicating data. I want it to be providing visuals, providing insight. I don't want to waste a bunch of space with a bunch of filters. Now, post 2019.2 that it came out, we have hidden and collapsing containers. If you haven't used those yet, please do. There were old methods for like shifting it out to the side that Robert Rouse, one of my colleagues at Interworks, put together. Great technique, but outdated now. It's much better to use a floating container on your Tableau dashboard. Click the drop down. There's a show hide option that'll give you the ability to expand out a container, stuff all your filters in there, combine it up. That's one route if you don't have access to embedding. If you do, you can use the JavaScript API to grab the values, bring them out here on the side of the view, stick them behind a icon, and then you can pass data back and forth. So your choice of data gets passed into your Tableau workbook. And so you see I've selected Edith Wheeler here. I don't think I left the GIF on long enough, but this is now her student workbook. This filter is up just as example. You'll see it changes from Earl to Edith as you're going in. Okay. So again, being able to show and hide filters and interactions as needed. Along with that, you get the added flexibility to be able to start showing multiple workbooks, or in this case, multiple slides from a Tableau story. So you've got your worksheets, you've got your dashboards, you have your story, and we can actually bring those together inside of a Scrolly Telling experience, where as you scroll down the page, it steps through your story without users having to click and interact along the top of it. Right, what we're trying to do is create a style of website experience that make people more apt to consume our dashboards rather than just hoping that they get there on Tableau server. And that feeds into this third point, right? When we're looking at our customers, when we're looking especially at our non-technical customers, we need to create a modern online experience for them. So Tableau server is great, but search bars, tags, hover overs, all these things make it much easier, and we found at Interworks help drive adoption of Tableau. The worst thing you can do as an organization is invest a lot of money in Tableau and then don't make it easy for people to consume. And so when you bring in this type of content in an embedded experience, people get it off the bat. They don't have to learn the new navigation. They use the familiar web things that they're used to. So you have mega menus, you have links that you're able to go and see. You're able to look to favorites. You can also then go through and search for what's needed, right? All of these things are available inside an embedded experience that are just surfacing your Tableau server environment. So if we're looking at where embedded sits, right? We've got Tableau server that hosts the workbooks that Tableau desktop has created. And then this presentation layer on top is what I'll refer to it as, sits right on top of Tableau server. It's a little web app or something that sits there. You can embed it. Tableau server is the engine to give them your data. And then this web app provides the experience to make it happen. And more than that, it provides a targeted experience. That I think is the biggest thing. I will personally even get lost in my own development of, am I in a dev project? Am I in a test project? Am I in a prod project? Where is that workbook that I had? How do I bring things up? Yes, I can favorite. Yes, I can tag. But for a non-developer, it can be overwhelming. It can look somewhat like this. So I don't know if anybody's seen lingscars.com. They are apparently one of the greatest online car sales websites in the world. Not just for self-advertising, but actually in terms of volume. But you remember, he is Ling, and you can trust him. I accessed this today. So the screenshot came from this afternoon. This is not a screenshot from mid-90s web development, which is kind of what it looks like. It's out there. And that is his brand. So right, you could argue that Ling's brand is unreadable, but it's not very targeted. I've been calling this out before. I do think it's worth mentioning that Tableau server and Tableau Online, whichever version you have, has been putting in a great amount of investment lately in making it more accessible for end users. But to me, it still feels like something that is developer focused first, consumer focused second. And so when you get to an embedded solution, you then have the ability to target your experience towards those consumers. If you ask me what my ballpark split of developers versus explorers versus viewers, so creators, explorers, viewers along Tableau's licensing, it's usually 5% creators on the high end, 15% explorers, maybe 80% viewers. So we got to make sure that we are focusing efforts to feed and feed. Like data doesn't quite provide nourishment, but I guess there's a theme here. It must be getting close to dinner here. Sorry, but to provide our workbooks and our content out to those end viewers. we're able to see what's available, make it that so that 80% is actually taken care of. And so that's that targeted experience to make it so that people can see what they need and you have that brand that you've provided. Now, making it happen, it's very simple, make versus buy. Interworks has something. I'm not here to sell you on stuff. If you want to make it yourself, then there's a couple things you need. You need time to develop it. You do need some web development knowledge on top of that to build up that web app, host it on a server somewhere. And then you need to be comfortable with APIs. So the JavaScript API and the REST API, both are given first-class status by Tableau. They give full access to most everything and most every interaction that's available on server you can get to with either of those. Your JavaScript API gives you those buttons. So things that we were looking at in terms of icons, in terms of kind of expanding menus, JavaScript controls that. Maybe you play around with the web menus with some CSS coding on top of that. The REST API handles security. So Tableau Server has robust permissions and settings. All that the REST API does is it takes the login from whatever web app you've created, passes that back to Tableau Server as your user, and then that compares against all of the user rules that you've set up to make sure that it works for you. So it's awesome to be able to go through and use these as it needs, because then it does actually open up some interesting new avenues. So we've seen this in the past couple of years with embedded analytics really taking off, is that you see kind of a tiered approach. And this is something that may be interesting to take back to your organizations to look at when you look at your investment inside of Tableau and what you're doing with it, especially when people are serving data out externally. There ends up being kind of a bronze, silver, gold tier that you can get. The bronze tier is just getting access to the data. So you start out and people aren't content. They don't want you to do insights for them. They say, look, just give me the data, whether it's SFTP or whether it's a more modern solution like using Snowflake and doing a data share in there where you can charge them based off how much they access the data, or they can just query it direct, copy it over to their environment. So Snowflake makes sharing your data very easy, but that's kind of the ground floor. Look, we're not going to do anything for it, but we're gathering, we're cleaning the data, we're giving you some expertise, and then we hand it right back to you. The second tier is what I would think of as traditional dashboarding, right? So you provide analytics. We have a core workbook with row-level security that responds to all of our different customers that are out there. So you have these 10, 20 set of reports baked into your platform, and then people get access to that. And then there's the third one, which is where you can market insight. So it's like, look, we built these 10 dashboards for you. We built these 20 dashboards for you. There's actually more that you can dig into here. We'll work with you in kind of a premium service, and then we'll be able to build out your analytics suite for you that we then deliver to you because you're contracting with us as the data provider. So us being anybody here on the call. This isn't, you have to use Interworks for this, not at all. This is if you're providing data in any way, especially externally, embedded analytics and branded analytics opens up the door to this kind of tiered support model. That also saves you some sanity as the Tableau developer, because if everybody is knocking down your door trying to get insights, but they're paying the same as the people you're just providing the data for, then you can get into a sticky situation where you're really pressed for time and feeling a bit burnt out. So just something that we see cropping up with our clients and kind of across the industry of people starting to look at dashboards, analytics, and embedding and branding as something that is not just a good service you can provide, but in fact is a product and an eventual revenue stream for you to help even more with justifying that Tableau investment, which lets us sit back and play with Tableau desktop some more, which is what we all love doing. So there's more info out there. We've got our Interworks blog that you can go look at. I've got my email up here. You've got Ryan's email. You're welcome to reach out to him. I do want to just throw it up here really quick because I saw it show up in the chat. If you go to curator.interworks.com, this, again, full disclosure, is our product that's out there that you can purchase and provide that embedded experience. But most importantly, this demos tab is what I wanted to call out. You can see that restaurant Interburger, our retail demo, healthcare, finance, that showcase, education, Salesforce, sports, all of these are public facing. Don't have to log in, don't have to see anything. Take those as your inspiration. Take them back and say, oh, this is really cool. Or, man, that was designed really well. How do I incorporate that? Maybe start out, just bring them into your workbooks. And then after that, if you want to go embedded, great, use these, riff off the design, go for that if you have the web development skills. If you need something more beyond that, we can talk to you, but really this is a resource that's available out there for you to use. So I'll stop that there. We're coming up with about 10 minutes left. I don't know, I've got a lot in the chat and Q&A. I haven't been able to dive into, but let me look through a few of those, see if there's any outstanding questions, or Ryan, if you can curate any of those for me.
Yeah, I can do that. We had one earlier on. If, say, we're proficient in HTML, JavaScript, website building, do you know what sort of things we would need to keep in mind when building these things ourselves, or versus reasons you might want to just, buy one that's already packaged up? And you touched on this a little bit, but if you want to expand.
Yeah, for sure. It's if you already have that proficiency in HTML coding, if you're comfortable with that and the API calls back and forth, awesome. Like, code it up, maintain it yourself. That's great. The only thing you have to watch out for is occasional API changes between versions. So Tableau's on their quarterly release, and sometimes they will update their underlying API. There was a bug fix that hit probably back in October, where all of a sudden, if you had your reference coded one way, all of your embedded dashboards broke. And so it's just, you have to watch for things and updates like that. Tableau communicated it out to the community. So just make sure you're involved in the kind of dev community pages and things if you end up going that route.
I have a question. So you're a consultant, and I imagine that you enable certain solutions like this to your clients. What is the typical use or typical client that you see trying to implement a solution like this? Is this only for enterprises? Is this for medium-sized companies, or?
Yeah, I see this as anybody with an audience. So there's really, and let me expand on that a little bit, sorry. So anybody with an audience is a bit vague, but as soon as you start distributing dashboards to non-technical users, that's when we see this type of branded analytics coming into play. And so that can be internally, you're just serving internal stakeholders. So it's when I was out in Portland, I worked for an analytics, I was on the strategy team, I was our data guy, and then we were trying to serve marketing, sales, our call center, and the executives. So that was our audience, and we would have liked to have something like this. We didn't even have server. This is back in the day before everything was bundled, and we just had desktop, so we emailed a lot. It wasn't wasn't the best. But when you're looking to share out dashboards outside of your technical use base, I think this takes hold. Another common use case we see is kind of what I alluded to at the end, where you are a data provider or you're capturing data for someone. So a lot of like electronic health records, things like that, or EMR, sorry, like electronic medical records, or you're somehow distributing data out to clients who buy data from you. This type of embedded solution could be really helpful, where you embed it inside of your own portal, right? So you just stand up a new analytics tab, you embed an iframe on there, that iframe references your Tableau server environment. And then all of a sudden your clients aren't just getting the kind of canned out of the box insights that they've gotten before, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, but then they can have the power of Tableau driving further insight on top of that. So anybody with an audience, but obviously the sophistication of it depends on how many people that you're distributing this out to.
If someone were to code up their own solution here, what are the very basics that you typically see in the wild? Maybe just like, it's something that's just a branded website that is simply just embedding an iframe, or is there something a little bit beyond that? What's like the next first thing that people tend to do?
Yeah, the first thing they tend to do is build out, kind of similar to what you saw in some of those demos, is a website and a frame, and then a nice menu navigation that makes it easy to find those production workbooks. So it can be as simple as that. You can build a very lightweight web app that does that. You shouldn't, but you could install it on your Tableau server hardware if you need that. You shouldn't, but if you're prototyping and things are on a budget, because I understand that happens, you could theoretically use server resources for it. In general, it's better, much, much better to have your own tiny little web app that handles that. And that can be a really small, really inexpensive piece of hardware supporting that.
Let's see if we have, we had a question, and you feel free to answer this, Ben. It is a little bit beyond embedded, but actually we could wrap in a question about that in this. But Cynthia is wondering how folks handle similar BI solutions within their orgs. We have projects that use both ThoughtSpot and Tableau, and they're being brought into BI for reporting. Typical use case is ThoughtSpot is more of a tool for analysts to do ad hoc analysis, where Tableau is used for more baked-in reporting. And Cynthia's just asking if others feel this way. So anybody in the audience too, feel free to chime in if you have an answer there. A question I want to tack onto this is that a lot of big enterprises or even small companies, you see just multiple tools that people use. And do you see this as a space to unify all of those tools, so that way someone's not going to, Microsoft's version of where they post, where you would publish BI reports versus going to Tableau server separately? Maybe you would have them all in one place.
Yeah, and I really think that's what it is we have several clients who have a massive Microsoft contract where they get some Power BI features for free. And so they'll use that for a few things, and then they'll use Tableau because that's their preferred reporting tool, and we'll embed it in both. And so one tab can be a Tableau dashboard that's pulled up, another one can be a Power BI report that comes up. And then for the ThoughtSpot, that one's definitely there. If you go to that restaurant link that was shared, we have an Ask Data demo there, which can do the similar things that ThoughtSpot's algorithm can do. It kind of depends on your use case of whether one is better than the other. But I'll say that in general, Tableau is known for its ease of use and friendliness. And so people tend to move towards the self-service analytics with more of a Tableau push rather than the traditional kind of reporting shop that distributes everything out. But it varies depending on every organization. And the nice thing about embedding and branding your analytics is you can brand it however you want. And you can, like Ryan was referencing, combine multiple tools. It doesn't have to be an or, it can be an and.
You guys mind if I chime in?
Go for it, John.
I would say just from where I currently am, I'm kind of the data person within a lot of social science researchers. So they're not as math heavy, not as tool intensive. The way I see Tableau fitting in is if you can teach them a few aspects of the tool, it really expands what they know is possible. So a lot of times, especially when I came in, I was seeing a lot of instances of, oh, they provide us a Power BI report and we can kind of filter on this way, but it's a little short, but it mostly gets done what we need it to get done. If you can show them solutions in Tableau, say, hey, I can build in statistical significance. Hey, we can build regressions right in here and just do basic analyses like that. I think it gets people a lot more excited and they start expanding their questions. And that's when you kind of build this culture a little bit further of, instead of just asking me, which value is higher for this period, let's go beyond that and figure out why.
Yeah, that's a great perspective there, Sean. Unfortunately, there's some good conversation happening here. I wish we could extend this another 15 minutes, but our time is up. I want to thank you, Sean, for letting us shine the spotlight on you. Again, I will post everything that Sean provided in a follow-up email, and that will be for everybody to explore. And then thank you, Ben, for, again, I'm going to do this 3 times now, for just yesterday, agreeing to do this. So we really appreciate it.
Happy to.
Enjoyed your talk a lot. And this is all recorded and will be posted for everybody to view if they wanted to view it again. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining. We'll have our next meeting in probably January or early February.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.